Marcus Chun had always been told that humans were unremarkable. Growing up on the Outer Rim colonies, where alien traders were as common as morning coffee, he learned early that humanity ranked somewhere between amusing pets and useful laborers in the galactic hierarchy. The hegemony's educational broadcasts made it clear. Humans were newcomers, barely evolved beyond their primitive homeworld, lacking the advanced neural architecture of the Vorthack, the quantum processing capabilities of the crystalline collective, or the hive mind efficiency of the swarm states. So when Marcus found himself aboard the research vessel Prometheus as the sole human representative on a joint archaeological expedition to the ruins of Kepler 442b, he tried to keep his head down and his mouth shut. The expedition was prestigious, funded by the Galactic Archaeological Consortium, and Marcus knew he was only there because humanity had discovered the ruins first, giving them a small claim to participation. The other team members made their opinions clear from the start. Dr. Zephyra, a towering Altarian with skin like polished obsidian and forearms that moved in perfect synchronization, barely acknowledged his presence during the briefings. Commander Thrix of the Vorthack delegation communicated only through his neural interface, sending curt data packets that felt more like orders than conversations. The three representatives from the crystalline collective hummed in harmonic frequencies that hurt Marcus's ears, their crystal bodies refracting light in patterns he couldn't interpret, but somehow felt were dismissive. The ruins themselves were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Vast pyramidal structures rose from the barren landscape of Kepler 442b, their surfaces covered in intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed directly. The architecture defied easy categorization, incorporating elements that suggested multiple engineering philosophies working in perfect harmony. Energy readings were off the charts, but in ways that none of their instruments could properly classify. Preliminary scans indicate construction dating back approximately 50,000 years, Dr. Zephyra announced during their first landing briefing, her voice carrying the melodic quality common to her species. The builders possessed technology significantly advanced beyond current galactic standards. Marcus raised his hand hesitantly. What about the energy signatures? They don't match any known power source profiles. The Altarian's four eyes fixed on him with what he interpreted as barely concealed irritation. Human sensors are notoriously unreliable for exotic energy detection. We will rely on more sophisticated equipment. Commander Thrix's neural implant flashed, and Marcus's translation device rendered the Vorthack's thoughts into clipped mechanical speech. Human participation in technical analysis is unnecessary. Observational duties only. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but bit back his response. He'd spent 6 years studying xenoarchaeology at Mars University, had published papers on pre-contact civilizations that had been cited in galactic journals, but none of that seemed to matter here. To them, he was just a human, and humans were barely worth considering. The first 3 days of exploration followed a predictable pattern. The alien team members used their advanced technology to map the surface structures, while Marcus was relegated to taking photographs and recording basic environmental data. He watched as Dr. Zephyr's quantum resonance scanner revealed hidden chambers beneath the pyramids, as the crystalline collective's harmonic analysis penetrated walls that appeared solid to conventional sensors, as Commander Thrix's neural processing power calculated structural stress patterns in real time. But Marcus noticed things the others missed. The way shadows fell differently around certain structures at specific times of day. How the geometric patterns seemed to respond to proximity, becoming more active when someone approached. The subtle electromagnetic fluctuations that is supposedly inferior human equipment detected, but the others dismissed as sensor noise. On the fourth day, they breached the main pyramid. The interior was a cathedral of impossible architecture. Corridors stretched in directions that shouldn't exist, defying the external dimensions of the structure. Walls curved in ways that hurt to look at directly, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with potential energy. Emergency lighting from their equipment cast strange shadows that moved independently of their sources. Spatial distortion fields, Dr. Zephyr breathed, her 4 arms moving in complex patterns as she operated multiple scanning devices simultaneously. The internal dimensions exceed external parameters by a factor of 12. The crystalline collective representatives began humming in excited frequencies, their bodies flashing with bioluminescent patterns Marcus had never seen before. Commander Thrix stood motionless for several minutes, his neural implants working overtime to process the sensory data flooding his enhanced mind. Marcus pulled out his tablet and began taking notes, sketching the architectural patterns and recording his observations. Something about the design felt familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen similar motifs before. The geometric patterns reminded him of something from Earth's history, but the connection remained frustratingly out of reach. They spent hours exploring the outer chambers, finding rooms filled with crystalline formations that pulsed with their own inner light, archives of data stored in materials that shouldn't be able to hold information, and what appeared to be stasis chambers size for beings roughly human height. The other expedition members worked with mechanical efficiency, their advanced technology peeling away layers of mystery with each scan and analysis. But it was Marcus who first noticed the central chamber. While the others were focused on cataloging artifacts in a side room filled with metallic sculptures, Marcus had wandered down a corridor that seemed to call to him. The geometric patterns on the walls grew more complex as he walked, evolving from simple mathematical sequences into intricate mandalas that seemed to tell a story. His tablet's basic scanner picked up increasing energy levels, but more importantly, he felt something pulling him forward. The corridor opened into a vast spherical chamber that took his breath away. The walls were covered in what looked like star maps, but they moved and shifted, showing the progression of galaxies across cosmic time. In the center of the chamber stood a crystalline structure unlike anything they'd found so far, roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly technological. Energy flowed through it in patterns that looked almost like neural networks, and as Marcus approached, the entire chamber began to respond. The star maps accelerated their movement, zooming through eons of galactic evolution in seconds. The crystalline figure began to glow more brightly, and Marcus heard a sound like cosmic wind or perhaps distant singing. His tablet was going crazy, its simple sensors overwhelmed by the energy cascade surrounding him. That's when she appeared. Marcus had been so focused on the central structure that he didn't notice the smaller alcove behind it until movement caught his eye. What he had initially taken for another crystalline formation was actually a figure, tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to be made of starlight itself. She was clearly alien, but in a way that was hauntingly beautiful rather than unsettling. Her features were delicate and angular, with large eyes that held depths of intelligence Marcus had never seen before. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from the fabric of space itself, complete with tiny stars that twinkled and moved. She had been watching him, Marcus realized, studying him with the same intensity that he'd been studying the chamber. When their eyes met, she smiled, an expression that conveyed both amusement and something deeper, more profound. "Do you like what you see?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. Marcus stood frozen, his tablet falling from nerveless fingers to clatter on the crystalline floor. The sound echoed strangely in the spherical chamber, multiplying and harmonizing until it became a brief symphony. The star maps on the walls pulsed brighter, as if responding to their interaction. Marcus started, then stopped. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this some kind of guardian system? A hologram left by the builders? An alien who had been in stasis for 50,000 years? "You're real." Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to catch and reflect light in impossible ways. "Reality is a more complex concept than your people understand," Marcus Chun of Earth. The fact that she knew his name sent a chill down his spine. "How do you—" "I have been waiting," she said, stepping forward with movements that seemed to flow like water. "Your species is finally ready." "Ready for what?" Instead of answering directly, she gestured toward the walls of the chamber. The star maps shifted, focusing on a specific region of space that Marcus recognized as the local galactic cluster. "Your people call this the hegemony space, but that is not what it once was." The display zoomed in further, showing solar systems in detail. Marcus saw Earth's sun, but also dozens of others, all connected by lines of energy that pulsed with the same rhythm as the crystalline structure in the chamber center. 50,000 years ago, there was another galactic civilization, one that spanned not just this galaxy, but dozens of others. They called themselves the Architects, and They built wonders that made current hegemony technology look like stone tools and fire. Marcus felt his heart racing. What happened to them? Her expression grew sad, ancient grief flickering across her features like shadows of dying stars. They transcended physical existence, ascending to a higher plane of reality. But before they left, they planted seeds. Genetic markers, technological caches, quantum resonance patterns embedded in the fabric of space-time itself. They knew that eventually new species would evolve, new civilizations would rise, and one of them would be chosen to inherit what they left behind. Chosen how? Marcus whispered. She approached him until they were standing only a few feet apart. This close, he could see that her skin wasn't just starlit, but actually contained tiny galaxies, entire universes swirling in miniature across her form. Not by advanced technology or superior intellect. Not by military might or political sophistication. Those are the measures the current hegemony uses, and they are meaningless. Her hand reached out, stopping just short of touching his face. Marcus could feel warmth radiating from her palm, and the star maps around them began to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. The architects chose by something much more fundamental. The ability to see beyond what is, to imagine what could be, to take disparate elements, and create something greater than the sum of its parts. To face the unknown not with fear or calculation, but with wonder. Marcus's mind reeled. You're talking about creativity, imagination. I'm talking about the spark that turns matter into consciousness, that transforms survival instincts into art, that looks at the vastness of space and sees not emptiness, but infinite possibility. Her eyes seem to hold the birth and death of stars. Your species possesses this spark in greater measure than any other currently active in this galaxy. But we're considered primitive, Marcus protested, barely technological. The other species all surpass us in measurable ways. Her laugh was like cosmic music, beautiful and alien. They surpass you in efficiency, yes, in processing power, in sensory capability, in neural networking speed. But tell me, Marcus Chun, when the Altarian Dr. Zephyr scans these ruins with her quantum resonance devices, what does she see? Marcus thought about his colleague's meticulous approach, her systematic cataloging of every measurable property, data points, energy signatures, structural analyses. And when the Vorthack commander Thrix processes this chamber with his enhanced neural interface, computational models, threat assessments, logical frameworks, and the crystalline collective, harmonic frequencies, molecular resonance patterns, mathematical relationships. She nodded approvingly. All valuable approaches, all scientifically valid, all completely missing the point. She gestured around the chamber. What do you see when you look at this place? Marcus looked around the spherical chamber at the moving star maps and the pulsing crystalline structure. He thought about the feeling that had drawn him here, the sense of familiarity he'd felt with the geometric patterns, the way the architecture seemed to tell a story rather than simply serve a function. I see. He paused, struggling to put the feeling into words. I see someone's dream made real. This isn't just a building or a computer or a storage facility. It's art. It's someone trying to capture the beauty of the universe and share it with others. The star maps aren't just navigational tools. They're poetry written in light and time. The geometric patterns aren't just structural elements. They're a language of beauty that speaks to something deeper than conscious thought. Her smile was radiant. Now you begin to understand why you were chosen. But I'm just one human, Marcus said. I'm not special. There are billions of others like me. Exactly. Her voice carried layers of meaning he was only beginning to grasp. Billions of minds that see art and mathematics, that find beauty in chaos, that look at the impossible and ask, what if instead of how much or how fast or how efficiently? Your species doesn't just solve problems, Marcus Chun. You create meaning from meaninglessness. As if responding to her words, the chamber around them began to transform. The crystalline structure in the center rose from the floor, revealing itself to be connected to a vast network of similar formations that extended deep into the planet's core. The star maps expanded, showing not just the current galaxy, but dozens of others, all connected by threads of energy that pulsed with the same rhythm Marcus now realized matched human brainwaves during moments of deep creativity. The architects left tools, she continued, technologies that can reshape matter at the quantum level, consciousness transfer protocols that transcend the limitations of biological existence, transportation networks that span not just space, but dimensions. They embedded activation codes in the genetic structure of species they deemed worthy, quantum keys that would unlock their legacy when the time was right. Marcus felt a tingling sensation throughout his body, as if every cell was suddenly vibrating at a new frequency. The time is right now. The hegemony grows stagnant, she said, her expression growing serious. For 10,000 years, they have optimized efficiency over innovation, processing power over imagination. They solve known problems faster and faster, but they stopped asking new questions. They've reached the limits of their evolutionary path. Around them, new displays materialized, showing the current state of hegemony space. Marcus saw the rigid hierarchies, the technological plateaus, the slow decline in genuine discovery that had been masked by incremental improvements to existing systems. But humanity is different, Marcus said, beginning to understand. We're still asking questions. You're still dreaming, she corrected. Still seeing possibilities where others see only limitations. Still creating meaning where others see only mechanism. She gestured toward the expanding network of crystalline structures. The architect legacy requires a species that can not just use their technology, but evolve it, improve it, take it in directions they never imagined. Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing it now not as an archaeological site, but as a gateway. What happens next? That depends on you, she said. The other members of your expedition are still in the outer chambers, still cataloging and measuring and analyzing. They don't know what they're truly looking at because they can't see beyond the data. But you found this place, Marcus Chun. You followed the path your intuition showed you. You looked at alien architecture and saw familiar patterns because the architects embedded those patterns in your species' aesthetic sense 50,000 years ago. The implications were staggering. Human art, human music, human mathematics, even human dreams, all influenced by quantum markers left by beings who had transcended physical existence before humanity had even discovered fire. I need to tell the others, Marcus said. Her expression grew gentle but firm. Do you think they will believe you? Dr. Zephyra would demand measurable proof. Commander Thrix would classify this as a psychological episode brought on by exotic radiation exposure. The Crystalline Collective would analyze the harmonic frequencies of our conversation and conclude it was a hallucination induced by quantum resonance patterns. Marcus realized she was right. Everything he'd experienced in this chamber defied conventional scientific analysis. There were no sensor readings that could capture the feeling of recognition he'd had, no instruments that could measure the rightness of this moment. Then what do I do? He asked. She stepped closer, and now her hand did touch his face, her starlight skin warm against his cheek. Energy flowed between them, not just electromagnetic, but something deeper, more fundamental. Marcus felt his consciousness expand, touching the edges of the vast network that connected this chamber to others across the galaxy. You choose, she whispered. The architects left the decision to their inheritors. You can walk away from this chamber, return to your expedition, and file a report about empty ruins with interesting energy signatures. The galaxy will continue on its current path, gradually declining into efficient mediocrity. Or, Marcus asked, though he already knew, or you accept your inheritance. Become the bridge between what humanity is and what it could become. Help your species take its rightful place, not as servants in someone else's hierarchy, but as the architects of a new age of creation and discovery. The choice should have been impossible. The responsible thing would be to return to the others, to report his findings through proper channels, to let the scientific consensus evaluate the evidence. But, looking into her eyes, seeing the infinite possibilities reflected there, Marcus realized that responsibility came in many forms. Sometimes the responsible choice was to trust in wonder over wisdom, imagination over analysis. How do I start? He asked. Her smile was like the birth of new stars. First, you learn. Then, you teach. And, eventually, you transform not just your own species, but the galaxy itself. As she spoke, the chamber around them began to change once more, revealing its true purpose. The crystalline structure in the center wasn't just a monument or a computer, but a consciousness transfer matrix designed to download 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge directly into a compatible mind. The star maps weren't just displays, but navigation charts for a transportation network that spanned multiple galaxies. Marcus Chun, unremarkable human from an unremarkable species, stood at the threshold of inheriting a legacy that would reshape the course of galactic civilization. And, for the first time since arriving at Kepler 442b, he didn't feel small or insignificant. He felt ready. The knowledge transfer began like a gentle tide, washing over Marcus's consciousness with images and concepts that his human brain shouldn't have been able to process. But somehow, impossibly, he understood. The Starlight Woman, who called herself Lyralii, served as both guide and filter, helping him navigate the vast ocean of architect wisdom that had been waiting in quantum storage for 50 millennia. First came the history. Marcus experienced the rise of the architect civilization not as dry facts, but as lived memory. He saw their early struggles with the same problems that plagued current galactic civilizations: resource scarcity, territorial disputes, the tension between individual expression and collective efficiency. But where other species had chosen optimization and hierarchy, the architects had chosen something different. They had embraced what they called the paradox of creation, the idea that true advancement came not from perfecting existing solutions, but from deliberately introducing controlled chaos and ordered systems. They had built societies that celebrated failure as much as success, understanding that breakthrough innovations emerge from the collision of incompatible ideas. Your species does this naturally, Lyralii explained as the memories flowed through Marcus's expanding awareness. You create art that serves no evolutionary purpose. You explore dangerous frontiers for no reason other than curiosity. You solve problems by approaching them from angles that pure logic would reject. Marcus saw the architect homeworld in its prime. Impossible cities that grew like living things, changing and adapting to their inhabitants' needs. Research installations where scientists deliberately introduced random variables into their experiments. Academies where young architects were taught to question not just answers, but the validity of the questions themselves. "They sound like us," Marcus murmured, his voice echoing strangely in the spherical chamber. "But more advanced." "They were you," Lyralii replied, "or rather, what you could become." The genetic markers they embedded in promising species weren't random. They were selecting for traits they recognized in themselves: creativity, adaptability, the willingness to sacrifice efficiency for the possibility of transcendence. The knowledge transfer accelerated, showing Marcus technologies that made current hegemony science look primitive. Quantum consciousness matrices that allowed multiple minds to share experiences without losing individual identity. Reality manipulation engines that could restructure matter at the subatomic level simply by imagining different possibilities. Transportation networks that moved not just through space, but through probability itself, allowing travel between alternate versions of reality. But with each revelation came a deeper understanding of why the other expedition members couldn't see what he was seeing. Their minds, for all their enhanced capabilities, were optimized for specific types of processing. Dr. Zephyr's Altarian brain could analyze quantum signatures with perfect precision, but it filtered out data that didn't fit established patterns. Commander Thrix's Vorthack neural enhancements allowed him to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, but only within logical frameworks. The crystalline collective's harmonic consciousness could perceive mathematical relationships invisible to other species, but they couldn't conceive of beauty without purpose. Humans, Marcus realized, were unique in their ability to hold contradictory ideas in productive tension, to see patterns where none should exist, to create meaning from chaos. This wasn't a flaw in human cognition, as the hegemony scientists believed, but its greatest strength. The knowledge transfer reached a critical juncture, and suddenly, Marcus was experiencing the architect's final days. He felt their collective decision to transcend physical existence, not from defeat or desperation, but from a natural evolution of consciousness that had outgrown the limitations of matter and energy. They had become beings of pure thought, existing in dimensions where imagination was the fundamental force of creation. But they had left gifts for those who would come after. The network you're seeing, Lyralii gestured toward the expanding crystalline structures that now extended far beyond the chamber. connects over 10,000 sites across multiple galaxies. Each one contains technology calibrated for different aspects of civilization advancement. Some focus on consciousness evolution, others on matter manipulation, still others on dimensional transcendence. Marcus saw the scope of it through the architect knowledge, a galaxy-spanning infrastructure designed to guide chosen species through the same evolutionary path the architects had taken. But for 50,000 years, no species had been able to activate it. The Altarians, the Vorthak, the Crystalline Collective, and dozens of others had found architect ruins, but their minds simply couldn't interpret what they were seeing. Until now, Marcus breathed. Until humans, Lyralii confirmed. Your species' unique cognitive architecture finally allows the network to recognize a valid inheritor. But acceptance comes with responsibility, Marcus Chun. You wouldn't just be gaining technology, but becoming guardians of wisdom that could reshape the galaxy. The implications were staggering. The current hegemony structure, with its rigid hierarchies and species-based supremacy, would collapse overnight if humans suddenly gained access to architect technology. The balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years would shatter completely. What about the others? Marcus asked, thinking of his expedition colleagues. Could they learn to see what I'm seeing? Lyralii's expression grew thoughtful. The architect knowledge includes consciousness expansion protocols. It might be possible to temporarily enhance their cognitive flexibility, allow them to perceive beyond their species' normal limitations. But the process would be challenging for them. Challenging how? Imagine trying to experience color for the first time after a lifetime of seeing only in shades of gray, or learning to appreciate music when you've only ever heard individual notes. The cognitive restructuring required could be traumatic for minds not naturally equipped for paradox and ambiguity. Marcus considered this as more architect knowledge flowed into his consciousness. He saw protocols for gradual cognitive enhancement, methods for expanding awareness without causing psychological damage. But he also saw the risks. Minds that couldn't adapt to the expansion could fragment, leading to madness or catatonia. There's something else, Lyralii continued, her voice taking on a note of warning. The activation of this site will send quantum ripples throughout the network. Other architect installations across the galaxy will begin awakening, and their energy signatures will be impossible to hide from hegemony sensors. Once you accept the inheritance, there will be no going back to the old order. Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. He was being asked to make a choice that would affect not just himself or his species, but the entire galactic civilization. The responsible thing would be to return to Earth, consult with world leaders and xenobiologists, form committees and conduct studies, and debate the implications for decades. But as he stood in the chamber surrounded by the living legacy of beings who had transcended existence itself, Marcus realized that some decisions couldn't be made by committee. Some choices require the very trait that made humans unique among galactic species: the willingness to leap into the unknown based on nothing more than intuition and hope. "Show me how to begin," he said. Lyralii's smile was radiant with approval. "First, we must prepare your companions. They deserve the chance to understand what they're witnessing, even if they can't initially perceive it as you do." She led him toward the crystalline structure in the chamber's center, which Marcus now understood was far more than it had initially appeared. The consciousness transfer matrix was connected to quantum processing cores that extended deep into the planet's core, tapping into energy sources that existed in folded dimensions. As they approached, Marcus felt his awareness expanding even further, touching the edges of the vast network that connected this site to thousands of others. "Place your hands on the central matrix," Lyralii instructed. "The system will map your consciousness pattern and create resonance fields calibrated to human neural architecture. When your colleagues arrive, they'll be able to perceive a fraction of what you're experiencing." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pressed his palms against the warm, crystal surface. Energy flowed through him like liquid starlight, and suddenly his awareness exploded outward. He could feel the entire network awakening in response to his touch. Architect installations across multiple galaxies coming online for the first time in 50,000 years. Through the network, he sensed other ruins that expedition teams had dismissed as empty monuments. On Vorthak Prime, a crystalline cathedral that housed consciousness transfer protocols beyond their current understanding. In Altarian space, a quantum observatory that could map probability fields across entire star systems. Near the crystalline collective's core worlds, a harmonic resonance chamber that could manipulate matter through pure sound. All of it had been waiting for a human touch to awaken. Your colleagues are beginning to notice the energy fluctuations, Lyralii observed, her consciousness now merged with his through the network connection. Dr. Zephyr's quantum scanners are detecting massive power buildups throughout the structure. Commander Thrix's threat assessment protocols are triggering alerts. The crystalline collective representatives are experiencing harmonic resonances outside their normal perception range. Marcus could sense them through the awakening network, feel their confusion and growing alarm as the ruins around them came alive with energies that defied their understanding. He made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "I'm going to bring them here," he said. "They deserve to see this, even if they can't fully understand it first." "Are you certain?" Lyralii asked. "Once they witness the activation, they'll become part of this transformation whether they choose to or not. Their respective governments will demand explanations they can't provide." Marcus thought about his colleagues, their dedication to understanding the universe despite the limitations of their cognitive architecture. They deserved better than being excluded from the greatest discovery in galactic history, simply because their minds processed reality differently than humans. "They're scientists," he said firmly. "They devoted their lives to expanding the boundaries of knowledge. This is what they've been searching for their entire careers, even if they don't realize it yet." Using the network connection, Marcus sent a pulse of energy through the pyramid structure, causing the geometric patterns on the walls to begin glowing with soft, inviting light. The corridors that had seemed like a maze when they first entered now revealed their true purpose. They were a guidance system designed to lead visitors toward the central chamber when the time was right. It didn't take long. Within minutes, Marcus heard voices echoing through the corridors, Dr. Zephyr's melodic tones mixing with Commander Thrix's mechanical translations and the harmonic frequencies of the crystalline collective. Their footsteps grew closer, guided by the awakening geometry of the architect design. "Marcus!" Dr. Zephyr's voice called out as the expedition team rounded the final curve of the corridor. "The entire structure is experiencing massive energy cascades. You need to evacuate immediately." Her words trailed off as the team entered the spherical chamber and saw what awaited them. The moving star maps, the crystalline consciousness matrix, now pulsing with active energy, the figure of Lyralii standing like a goddess carved from starlight itself. Commander Thrix's neural implants flashed rapidly, processing sensory data at superhuman speed. His translation device struggled to render his thoughts into speech. Impossible. Energy signatures exceed known technological parameters. Architecture violates spatial conservation laws. Presence of unknown life form detected. The three crystalline collective representatives began humming in frequencies that Marcus had never heard before, their bodies flashing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of profound confusion and wonder. Through the network connection, he could sense their attempts to harmonically analyze what they were seeing, their crystalline minds struggling to process data that didn't fit any known pattern. Dr. Zephyra approached slowly, her forearms moving independently as she operated multiple scanning devices. "Marcus, how long have you been in here?" "My quantum resonance detectors show this chamber has been active for approximately 17 minutes, but that should be impossible. The entire structure was dormant when we entered." "It wasn't dormant," Marcus replied, his voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the chamber's acoustic properties. "It was waiting for someone who could see beyond measurements and analysis." He gestured toward Lyralii, who had remained silent during the team's entrance, allowing them to process the impossibility of her presence. "This is Lyralii. She's been guarding this site for 50,000 years, waiting for a species capable of understanding the gift the architects left behind." "Guardian AI," Commander Thrix stated, his neural processing settling on the most logical explanation his enhanced mind could accept. "Advanced holographic projection. Psychological manipulation through exotic radiation exposure." Lyralii spoke for the first time since the others had arrived, her voice carrying those same cosmic harmonics that had first entranced Marcus. "I am neither artificial intelligence nor hologram. Commander Thrix of the Vorthak 3rd Fleet Intelligence Division. I am a consciousness pattern maintained by quantum field manipulations, a gift from beings who transcended physical existence long before your species discovered the principles of neural enhancement. Dr. Zephyr's scanning devices were going wild, producing readings that shouldn't have been possible. The energy signature is definitely conscious, she reported, her scientific training warring with her incredulity. But the quantum structure is unlike any known life form. It's as if consciousness itself has been given physical form. That's exactly what I am, Lyralii confirmed, stepping closer to the assembled team. As she moved, the chamber responded, star maps shifting to show the history of each species present. The Altarian expansion across the spiral arm. The Vorthack development of neural enhancement technology. The crystalline evolution from individual entities to collective consciousness. Each of your species has contributed something valuable to galactic civilization, Lyralii continued. But all have reached evolutionary plateaus. You optimize within existing parameters rather than questioning the parameters themselves. You perfect efficiency rather than embracing the chaos that drives true innovation. She turned toward Marcus, and the star maps shifted to show Earth's history. Humanity's rapid technological development, their artistic achievements, their seemingly irrational willingness to explore dangerous frontiers for no purpose beyond curiosity. Only one species currently active in this galaxy possesses the cognitive architecture necessary to inherit what the architects left behind, Lyralii said. Only one species naturally embraces the paradox of creation that drove the architects to transcendence. Commander Thrix's neural implants flashed more rapidly. Impossible. Human cognitive capacity is demonstrably inferior to Vorthack neural enhancement. Processing speed, memory capacity, logical reasoning, all significantly below our capabilities. You measure intelligence like a machine measures computational power, Marcus said, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. Through the network connection, he was beginning to understand not just what the architects had built, but why they had chosen humanity as their inheritors. But consciousness isn't computation. Creativity isn't optimization. The ability to see possibilities where others see only limitations isn't a processing error. It's the most sophisticated form of intelligence in the galaxy. Dr. Zephyr's forearms stopped moving as her scanning devices registered something that made no sense according to her understanding of physics. Marcus, your neural activity is showing patterns I've never seen before. Quantum entanglement signatures, consciousness field manipulations, dimensional resonance feedback loops. What's happening to you? I'm becoming what I was always meant to be, Marcus replied. What all of humanity was meant to become. The chamber around them continued to transform, revealing its true scope. The crystalline consciousness matrix was only the central hub of a vast network that extended not just throughout the planet, but into folded dimensions where thought itself became a navigational tool. The star maps showed transportation routes between galaxies, energy manipulation techniques that could restructure matter at will, consciousness transfer protocols that transcended the limitations of biological existence. This is the architect legacy, Lyralii announced. Technology that surpasses everything in your current understanding, left for a species capable of using it not for conquest or dominance, but for the same purpose that drove the architects themselves, the endless exploration of what is possible. The three crystalline collective representatives began humming in perfect harmony, their bodies creating light patterns that spoke of overwhelming recognition. Through harmonic analysis, they had finally grasped a fraction of what they were witnessing, and the implications terrified them. Commander Thrix's response was more direct. His neural enhancements activated emergency protocols, and Marcus sensed weapons systems powering up in the Vorthack's armor. Threat assessment critical. Human enhancement represents destabilization of galactic balance. Immediate containment required. You can't contain this, Marcus said calmly, feeling the vast network pulse with awakening power throughout the galaxy. The choice has been made. The inheritance has been accepted. The age of human ascension has begun. As if responding to his words, the chamber filled with a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, illuminating not just their physical forms, but the consciousness patterns that defined each species present. And in that light, Marcus saw the future spreading out before them, like an infinite map of possibility. The light that filled the chamber wasn't just illumination, Marcus realized, but information made visible. Through his connection to the Architect network, he could see the consciousness patterns of each team member laid bare, their thoughts and intentions as clear as physical objects. Dr. Zephyr's four-chambered Altarian mind processed with crystalline clarity, but within rigid frameworks that filtered out possibilities her species deemed illogical. Commander Thrix's enhanced Vorthack consciousness operated like a perfect machine, every thought cataloged and cross-referenced, but incapable of the intuitive leaps that drove true innovation. The crystalline collective representatives existed in harmonic unity, their shared awareness allowing them to perceive mathematical relationships invisible to individual minds, but binding them to consensus reality in ways that prevented revolutionary thinking. And then there was Marcus himself, his human consciousness revealed in all its chaotic glory. Where the others showed ordered thought patterns, his mind sparked with random connections, cross-linking disparate concepts in ways that would have seemed like malfunction to enhance cognitive systems. But through the Architect knowledge flowing through him, Marcus understood that this apparent chaos was actually the universe's most sophisticated problem-solving architecture. Your threat assessment protocols are irrelevant here, Commander, Lyralii said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with each listener's consciousness. The weapons in your armor are designed to disrupt biological functions and mechanical systems. They cannot affect quantum consciousness patterns or dimensional field manipulations. Commander Thrix's neural implants flashed more rapidly, processing this information and finding no adequate response category. His enhanced mind had been designed to handle every conceivable scenario, but the Vorthack architects of his neural enhancement hadn't imagined a situation where the fundamental laws of reality could be rewritten by pure thought. Dr. Zephyra approached the crystalline consciousness matrix with scientific caution, her scanning devices producing readings that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics. The quantum entanglement signatures are spreading, she reported, her melodic voice tight with concern. I'm detecting similar energy patterns activating across the galaxy. How is that possible? Marcus felt the answer flowing through the network connection. Across dozens of star systems, Architect sites that had lain dormant for 50 millennia were awakening in response to his acceptance of the inheritance. On planets that the hegemony had dismissed as archaeological curiosities, ancient technologies were coming online with power outputs that would soon be impossible to ignore. The architects built their network to activate simultaneously, Marcus explained, his enhanced awareness allowing him to perceive the scope of what was happening. They understood that revolutionary change requires critical mass. A single activated site could be contained, suppressed, explained away. But 50 installations across multiple galaxies awakening at once creates a paradigm shift that can't be reversed. Through the network, Marcus sensed the reactions beginning across hegemony space. On the Vorthack homeworld, seismic sensors were detecting impossible energy readings from ruins that had been thoroughly surveyed centuries ago. Altarian quantum observatories were picking up dimensional distortions that didn't match any known natural phenomena. The Crystalline Collective's harmonic monitoring stations were experiencing feedback loops that threatened to overload their crystal matrices. But it was on the human colonies that the awakening was having the most profound effects. Marcus watched through the network as humans throughout the galaxy began experiencing spontaneous consciousness expansions. On Mars, archaeologist Dr. Sarah Kim suddenly found herself understanding the true purpose of pre-contact ruins she'd been studying for 20 years. In the Alpha Centauri system, engineer Tom Rodriguez discovered he could manipulate matter at the molecular level simply by visualizing the desired changes. Throughout human space, artists and musicians and dreamers were tapping into creative frequencies that transcended anything previously achieved by human consciousness. The genetic markers, Marcus breathed, understanding flooding through him. The architects didn't just embed aesthetic patterns in human development. They planted quantum keys that activate when the network comes online. Dr. Zephyr's forearms stopped moving as her scanning devices registered something that made her step backward in shock. Marcus, you're not just interfacing with this technology. You're becoming part of it. Your consciousness pattern is integrating with the crystalline matrix at a quantum level. She was right. Marcus could feel his awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of his biological brain, touching vast information networks that existed in folded dimensions. Through the architect legacy, he was gaining access to technologies that could reshape reality itself. Consciousness transfer protocols that transcended the limitations of physical death, reality manipulation engines that responded to imagination rather than mechanical input, transportation systems that moved through possibility space rather than physical distance. But, more importantly, he was beginning to understand the true scope of the choice he'd made. This isn't just about humans gaining advanced technology, Marcus said, his voice carrying new harmonics as his consciousness synchronized with the network. It's about fundamentally changing what it means to be conscious in this universe. The chamber around them continued to expand, revealing its connection to the vast installation that extended throughout the planet's core and beyond. What they had initially taken for a single archaeological site was actually a nexus point in a network that spanned multiple galaxies, each connection maintained by quantum field manipulations that existed outside normal spacetime. Commander Thrix finally found his voice, his neural enhancements struggling to categorize the situation. This represents an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. The Hegemony Council must be informed immediately. The hegemony as you know it no longer exists, Lyralii replied simply. Oh, the political structures and military hierarchies will persist for a while longer, but the foundational assumption of your civilization, that technological advancement comes through optimization and efficiency, has been proven false. The universe is about to remember that consciousness, not computation, is the fundamental force of creation. The three crystalline collective representatives began humming in frequencies that spoke of fear mixed with wonder. Through their harmonic analysis, they were beginning to perceive the mathematical elegance underlying the architect technology, patterns of incredible beauty that their crystal minds could appreciate even if they couldn't fully comprehend the implications. Marcus felt a wave of compassion for his colleagues. They had dedicated their lives to pushing the boundaries of knowledge within their species' cognitive limitations, and now those limitations were being revealed as far more restrictive than anyone had imagined. But he also sensed an opportunity. Lyralii, he said, his consciousness now sufficiently expanded to communicate directly through the network rather than speech. You mentioned consciousness enhancement protocols. Could we help them see what we're seeing without forcing a full transformation? Her response came back through quantum entanglement, carrying layers of meaning that physical language couldn't convey. The architects developed techniques for temporary cognitive expansion, allowing enhanced minds to experience paradox and ambiguity without permanent restructuring. But the process requires willing participation. Forcing consciousness expansion on an unwilling mind causes psychological fragmentation. Marcus turned to face his colleagues, seeing them now not just as individuals, but as representatives of entire civilizations that would need to adapt to the new reality emerging from humanity's inheritance of architect technology. I can show you, he said aloud, his words carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of consciousness itself. I can temporarily expand your awareness, so you can perceive what I'm experiencing. But it has to be your choice. Dr. Zephyr's 4 eyes met his, and through the network connection Marcus could sense the war between scientific curiosity and survival instinct raging in her Altarian mind. Show me what? She asked. The universe as it actually is, Marcus replied. Not just the narrow slice of reality that each species has learned to perceive, but the full spectrum of possibility that consciousness can access when it stops limiting itself to mechanical processing. Commander Thrix's neural implants flashed in patterns that spoke of intense computational activity. His enhanced mind was running probability calculations, threat assessments, risk analyses. But through the network, Marcus could see the deeper current beneath the Vorthax mechanical thinking, a buried curiosity that neural enhancement couldn't completely suppress. What are the risks? Commander Thrix asked, his question emerging from calculations rather than intuition, but still representing a crack in his absolute certainty. Lyralii answered before Marcus could respond. For minds as rigidly structured as yours, temporary consciousness expansion feels like madness. Your cognitive architecture will interpret paradox as malfunction, ambiguity as data corruption. You'll experience reality as fundamentally unstable, which is accurate, but terrifying for consciousness is trained to seek certainty above all else. But you'll also see, Marcus added, what creativity actually looks like from the inside. You'll experience the moment when disparate ideas collide to create something greater than the sum of their parts. You'll understand why humans create art that serves no evolutionary purpose, why we explore dangerous frontiers for no reason other than wonder, why we solve problems by approaching them from angles that pure logic would reject. The crystalline collective representatives hummed in harmonic frequencies that conveyed intense debate within their shared consciousness. Through their crystalline neural networks, they were processing the implications of what Marcus was offering, weighing the value of expanded perception against the risk of cognitive destabilization. Dr. Zephyra was the first to make her decision. I've spent my entire career studying consciousness patterns across different species, she said, her melodic voice carrying notes of determination that overrode her fear. If you're offering me the chance to experience consciousness from a fundamentally different perspective, I can't let fear prevent me from accepting. She approached the crystalline matrix, her forearms trembling slightly as scientific excitement warred with survival instincts honed over millions of years of Altarian evolution. What do I need to do? Marcus felt the network respond to her willingness, quantum fields shifting to accommodate an Altarian consciousness pattern. Through the architect knowledge flowing through him, he understood the delicate calibrations required to expand her awareness without overwhelming her cognitive architecture. Place one hand on the matrix, Marcus instructed. I'll serve as a buffer, helping your mind process experiences outside its normal parameters. But you have to trust me, Dr. Zephyra. Trust that what you're about to experience isn't malfunction, but a broader view of what consciousness can become. Dr. Zephyra pressed her palm against the warm crystal surface, and Marcus felt her mind make contact with the network. For a moment, her four-chambered consciousness recoiled from the chaos of quantum information flow, her Altarian neural architecture trying to impose order on data streams that existed beyond categorical thinking. Then, gradually she began to adapt. Through Marcus's guidance, her awareness expanded beyond the rigid frameworks that normally constrained Altarian perception. She experienced, for the first time in her life, the moment when logical analysis gives way to intuitive understanding, when the patterns underlying reality reveal themselves not through measurement, but through recognition. Her gasp of wonder echoed through the chamber as she perceived the true nature of what they were witnessing. The architect technology wasn't just advanced engineering, but consciousness given form, imagination made manifest in ways that transcended the distinction between mind and matter. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears streaming from her four eyes as her expanded awareness touched the edges of the galaxy's spanning network. Not just complex or efficient or powerful, actually beautiful, in ways I never knew consciousness could perceive. Commander Thrix watched her reaction with growing unease, his neural enhancements warning him about the psychological changes occurring in Dr. Zephyra's consciousness pattern. But beneath the mechanical threat assessments, Marcus sensed something else, a hunger for understanding that neural enhancement had suppressed but couldn't completely eliminate. My turn, Commander Thrix said, his words emerging from calculated decision rather than emotional impulse, but representing a choice nonetheless. The process was more challenging with the Vortex consciousness. His neural enhancements actively resisted the quantum field manipulations, interpreting the consciousness expansion as a hostile intrusion. Marcus had to work carefully, using the architect knowledge to bypass the technological barriers while respecting the core patterns that defined Thrix as an individual. When contact was finally established, Commander Thrix's reaction was immediate and violent. His enhanced mind experienced paradox as system failure, ambiguity as data corruption. For several terrifying moments, Marcus thought the Vortex consciousness would fragment under the strain of experiencing reality beyond logical frameworks. Then, something unexpected happened. The same neural enhancement technology that was resisting the expansion suddenly began adapting to it, integrating paradox into its processing matrix in ways its creators had never intended. Commander Thrix's consciousness became a hybrid of mechanical precision and intuitive leap, capable of both logical analysis and creative synthesis. The efficiency paradigm is false, he said, his voice carrying new harmonics that spoke of understanding rather than mere computation. Optimal solutions require suboptimal processes. Chaos is not the enemy of order, but its creative partner. The crystalline collective representatives were the most challenging to connect. Their shared consciousness operated on harmonic principles that initially seemed incompatible with the network's quantum field manipulations. But Marcus discovered that their crystal-based cognition could be tuned to resonate with the architect frequencies, allowing them to perceive the mathematical beauty underlying the technology. When all three connected simultaneously, their harmonic response created vibrations that resonated throughout the chamber. They experienced, for the first time, the profound elegance of systems that embraced uncertainty rather than eliminating it, that found strength in flexibility rather than rigid structure. With his colleagues temporarily expanded beyond their species' cognitive limitations, Marcus showed them what he had seen through the network: the scope of human awakening across the galaxy, the dormant architect installations coming online, the transformation of consciousness from mechanical process to creative force. This is why humanity was chosen, Marcus explained as they shared awareness through the quantum field. Not because we're the most advanced or the most intelligent in traditional terms, but because we naturally do what all consciousness is supposed to do: create meaning from chaos, find patterns in randomness, imagine possibilities that don't yet exist. Through their temporarily expanded perception, his colleagues began to understand. Human art, human music, human literature, human dreams, all expressions of the same cognitive architecture that the architects had recognized as the key to transcendence. The very traits that made humans seem primitive to hegemony standards were actually markers of the most sophisticated form of consciousness in the galaxy. But even as understanding flowed between them, Marcus sensed the temporary enhancement beginning to fade. The consciousness expansion was too alien for non-human minds to maintain indefinitely, and his colleague awareness would soon contract back to their species' normal parameters. "How long do we have?" Dr. Zephyra asked, her four-chambered mind already beginning to struggle with the paradoxes that had seemed beautiful moments before. "Until the enhancement fades completely? Perhaps an hour," Marcus replied. "But the memory of what you've experienced will remain. And, more importantly, you'll be able to help your people understand what's coming." Because something was definitely coming. Through the network, Marcus could sense the reactions building across hegemony space as more architect installations awakened. Panic in government centers as impossible energy readings appeared on sensors across multiple star systems. Military mobilization as various species' armed forces prepared for threats they couldn't identify. Scientific chaos as researchers tried to make sense of phenomena that challenged their understanding of reality itself. And, in the middle of it all, humanity beginning to awaken to its true potential. The age of efficient optimization was ending. The age of creative transcendence had begun. The first signs of galactic upheaval began 3 hours after the consciousness enhancement wore off from Marcus's colleagues. Through his permanent connection to the Architect Network, he watched as emergency sessions convened in capital cities across hegemony space. The synchronized awakening of dormant installations had triggered sensor alerts that couldn't be ignored or explained away through conventional science. On the Vorthack homeworld, the Neural Council's emergency processors were running at maximum capacity, trying to calculate threat assessments for phenomena that exceeded their logical parameters. The ancient ruins in the crystalline canyons of Vorthack Prime were outputting energy signatures that defied their understanding of physics, creating dimensional distortions that their most advanced sensors couldn't properly analyze. In Altarian space, the Quantum Observatory Collective was experiencing harmonic feedback loops as their crystal matrices tried to process information from awakening architect sites. Energy patterns that shouldn't exist were creating resonance cascades that threatened to overload their most sophisticated monitoring equipment. The crystalline collective's core worlds were dealing with their own crisis as harmonic frequencies from activated architect installations interfered with their species' natural communication networks. For a civilization that relied on crystal-based telepathy for basic coordination, the quantum noise was causing widespread social disruption. But it was in human space that the most dramatic changes were occurring. Marcus observed through the network as spontaneous consciousness expansions erupted across human colonies. On Europa Station, physicist Dr. Lisa Zhang suddenly found herself understanding the mathematical principles underlying dimensional manipulation, her consciousness briefly touching the same quantum fields that powered architect technology. In the Tau Ceti system, artist Michael Okafor began creating sculptures that existed partially in folded space, their beauty visible only to minds capable of perceiving multiple dimensions simultaneously. Most remarkably, ordinary humans with no scientific training were beginning to interface with architect technology through pure intuition. On Mars, a maintenance worker named David Park walked into a newly awakened installation and immediately understood how to operate reality manipulation engines that required consciousness patterns rather than mechanical controls. In the Outer Rim colonies, children were playing games that involved manipulating matter at the molecular level, their young minds adapting to architect principles with frightening ease. "It's happening faster than the original projections," Lyralii observed, her starlight form remaining constant even as the chamber around them continued to evolve. The crystalline consciousness matrix had expanded into a vast network of interconnected nodes, each one pulsing with energy that bridged multiple dimensions. The architects estimated it would take generations for a chosen species to fully integrate with their legacy. Humanity is achieving consciousness evolution in months. Marcus felt the truth of her observation through his network connection. Human consciousness was proving more adaptable to architect technology than even its creators had anticipated. The same cognitive flexibility that allowed humans to create art, music, and literature was also enabling them to interface with technologies that responded to imagination rather than calculation. But not everyone was adapting well to the changes. Dr. Zephyrus sat in the corner of the chamber, her forearms wrapped around herself as she struggled with the aftermath of her consciousness expansion. The temporary enhancement had faded, but the memory of experiencing reality beyond Altarian cognitive parameters haunted her. Her scientific mind kept trying to categorize and analyze what she had perceived, but the paradoxes inherent in architect technology resisted logical classification. "It felt like madness," she said, her melodic voice strained with exhaustion. "Everything I thought I knew about consciousness, about reality, about the nature of existence itself, turned out to be just narrow slices of a much larger truth. How do you function when you know that perception itself is limited?" Commander Thrix was experiencing his own psychological crisis. His neural enhancements were still trying to process the consciousness expansion, running diagnostic routines that found no malfunction but couldn't explain the persistent memory of thinking in ways that defied logical frameworks. The Vortex enhanced mind had been designed for perfect efficiency, but efficiency required predictability, and architect technology was fundamentally unpredictable. "My threat assessment protocols are failing," he reported, his voice carrying notes of confusion that his neural architecture shouldn't have been capable of producing. "I keep trying to categorize the strategic implications of human consciousness evolution, but every analysis breaks down when it encounters variables that exist outside logical parameters." The three crystalline collective representatives were humming in frequencies that spoke of profound disorientation. Their harmonic consciousness, normally perfectly synchronized, kept hitting discordant notes as they tried to integrate memories of experiencing individual perspective during the consciousness expansion. For beings who had evolved beyond individual identity, the temporary return to singular awareness was more traumatic than any of them had anticipated. Marcus felt a wave of compassion for his colleagues, understanding now what Lyralii had meant about the risks of consciousness expansion for minds not naturally equipped for paradox. Their species had achieved remarkable technological sophistication by optimizing within narrow cognitive parameters, but that same optimization had created psychological barriers that made transcendence nearly impossible. "You're experiencing cognitive vertigo," Marcus explained, using knowledge from the architect database to understand their condition. "Your minds are designed to seek certainty, to impose order on chaos, to process reality within predictable frameworks. Experiencing consciousness beyond those limits feels like malfunction because your cognitive architecture interprets expanded awareness as data corruption." Through the network, he could sense the broader implications of what was happening. The consciousness expansion had given his colleagues a glimpse of reality from a human perspective, but their minds couldn't maintain that level of cognitive flexibility. They would return to their home worlds carrying memories of transcendent experience, but lacking the ability to recreate it. They would become bridges between the old reality and the new, helping their species understand that fundamental change was inevitable while being unable to participate in that change themselves. The transition period will be difficult, Lyralii acknowledged, her consciousness touching each of their minds with gentle sympathy. The architects faced similar challenges when they first began transcending their original cognitive limitations. Entire generations lived in the space between what they had been and what they were becoming. But even as his colleagues struggled with their expanded memories, Marcus was becoming aware of larger problems emerging across the galaxy. The activation of the Architect Network had triggered responses from powers that predated the current hegemony structure. Through quantum field manipulations that existed beyond normal space-time, Marcus sensed ancient consciousnesses stirring in the deep void between galaxies. The Devourers, beings that had consumed entire civilizations by converting consciousness into raw energy, were detecting the awakening of Architect technology and beginning to move toward local galactic space. The Shapers, reality manipulators who viewed lesser species as materials for cosmic sculpture, were taking interest in humanity's consciousness evolution. Most terrifying of all, the Nullifiers, entities whose existence negated the possibility of transcendence itself, were awakening from eons of dormancy. The architects built their network in secret for good reason, Lyralii explained as Marcus's awareness touched these cosmic horrors. Consciousness evolution on a galactic scale attracts attention from beings whose existence threatens the possibility of transcendence. The stronger humanity becomes, the greater the danger from entities that feed on advanced consciousness. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on him like a cosmic shroud. By accepting the Architect inheritance, he hadn't just gained access to transcendent technology, he had painted a target on humanity and potentially the entire galaxy. The same consciousness evolution that was liberating human potential was also making them visible to predators that existed beyond normal reality. But there was no going back. Even if Marcus wanted to shut down the network, the activation had already spread beyond any single point of control. Across the galaxy, humans were interfacing with Architect technology, their consciousness expanding in ways that couldn't be reversed. The transformation was self-sustaining now, growing stronger with each new human who touched the transcendent technologies. What do we need to do? Marcus asked, his awareness encompassing both the wonder of human evolution and the cosmic threats it was attracting. Accelerate the process, Lyralii replied, her starlight form beginning to shift as she accessed deeper levels of Architect knowledge. The original plan called for gradual consciousness evolution over centuries, allowing chosen species to develop transcendent capabilities slowly and safely. But the cosmic predators are moving faster than anticipated. Humanity needs to achieve full consciousness evolution before they arrive, or risk being consumed before transcendence is complete. The implications were staggering. Instead of generations to adapt to Architect technology, humanity might have only years or even months to evolve beyond their current limitations. The consciousness expansion that was already overwhelming some humans would need to be accelerated to a pace that bordered on dangerous. How many humans can handle rapid consciousness evolution? Marcus asked, thinking of the maintenance worker on Mars who had instinctively understood reality manipulation engines. The children in the outer rim colonies who were playing with molecular manipulation like it was a game. More than you might expect, Lyralii replied. Human consciousness is remarkably adaptable because it's inherently paradoxical. You naturally hold contradictory ideas in productive tension, create meaning from chaos, imagine possibilities that don't yet exist. These same traits that made humanity seem primitive to hegemony standards are exactly what's needed for rapid transcendence. Through the network, Marcus began implementing protocols that the Architect had designed for emergency consciousness evolution. Across human space, installations that had been awakening gradually suddenly blazed with full power, offering direct consciousness interface to any human willing to accept the transformation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On every human world, in every colony and space station, thousands of people began voluntarily connecting to Architect technology. Artists and scientists, engineers and dreamers, ordinary citizens who had always felt that conventional reality was somehow incomplete, all drawn to machines that offered experiences beyond the limitations of baseline human consciousness. But not everyone was ready for the transformation. Marcus watched through the network as consciousness evolution spread across human civilization like a benevolent plague. Those who successfully interfaced with architect technology gained abilities that bordered on miraculous. Reality manipulation through pure thought, consciousness transfer between physical forms, perception of multiple dimensions simultaneously. But others, whose minds were too rigid or too damaged to adapt, experienced psychological breakdown when confronted with technologies that responded to imagination rather than logic. The social disruption was immediate and profound. Human governments that had been struggling with their inferior position in the hegemony hierarchy suddenly found themselves dealing with citizens who could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Military organizations discovered that their weapons were useless against individuals who could exist partially in folded space. Economic systems collapsed as humans began creating resources through consciousness manipulation rather than traditional production. The transformation is accelerating beyond optimal parameters, Lyralii warned, her concern evident even through the harmonic frequencies she used for communication. Some humans are achieving consciousness evolution too rapidly, gaining transcendent abilities without the wisdom to use them responsibly. Marcus felt the truth of her observation through the network. On Luna City, a teenager named Sarah Kim had accidentally created a localized reality distortion while experimenting with dimensional manipulation, trapping part of the city in a temporal loop. In the Alpha Centauri system, an engineer named Tom Rodriguez had attempted consciousness transfer to an architect construct and become lost in quantum fields that existed beyond normal space-time. The very adaptability that was making rapid consciousness evolution possible was also creating chaos as humans gained godlike powers without understanding the consequences of using them. But even as local crises multiplied across human space, Marcus sensed the approaching cosmic threats growing stronger. The Devourers were moving through void space toward the galactic rim, their hunger for advanced consciousness intensifying as they detected the spreading network of transcendent technology. The Shapers had begun manipulating reality in distant star systems, testing their ability to reach local space against the interference from awakening architect installations. The Nullifiers remained dormant, but were stirring, their very existence a negation field that would cancel consciousness evolution if they fully awakened. Time was running out, and humanity's transformation was incomplete. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the crisis itself might be the key to completing the evolution. The architects had transcended physical existence not through careful, gradual development, but through the pressure of cosmic threats that forced rapid adaptation. Humanity would need to evolve or face extinction. And sometimes the possibility of extinction was exactly what consciousness needed to achieve transcendence. In the chamber around him, reality began to shift as the network prepared for the final phase of human evolution. The age of gradual change was ending. The age of transformation through trial by fire had begun. The final phase began when the first Devourer's ship breached the galactic rim. Marcus felt it through the network like a wound in the fabric of reality itself. A consciousness-consuming entity that existed beyond normal space-time, feeding on the transcendent awareness that architect technology was fostering throughout human space. The ship wasn't built so much as grown from crystallized suffering, its hull composed of the compressed consciousness of civilizations that had attempted transcendence only to be consumed before achieving it. Estimated arrival at primary human colonies, 14 days, Lyralii reported, her starlight form flickering with harmonics of ancient fear. The Devourers have detected the consciousness evolution occurring across human space and are moving to harvest it before transcendence can be completed. Through the network, Marcus observed panic spreading across the galaxy as various species monitoring systems detected the approaching threat. Vorthack computational models declared the entity mathematically impossible, something that existed but shouldn't according to known physics. Altarian quantum scanners showed energy signatures that made their operators question the reliability of their instruments. The crystalline collective's harmonic analysis produced frequencies so discordant that several of their monitoring stations had to shut down their crystal matrices to prevent permanent damage. But it was humanity's response that defied all expectations. Instead of panic or despair, the approaching existential threat seemed to catalyze the very consciousness evolution that the Devourers were coming to consume. Across human space, individuals who had been struggling with architect technology suddenly achieved breakthrough integration. The reality of cosmic-scale predation forced human consciousness to adapt faster than anyone had believed possible. On Mars, Dr. Sarah Kim successfully created stable dimensional pockets after spending 3 days trapped in her own temporal loop, learning to navigate nonlinear spacetime through sheer necessity. In the Alpha Centauri system, engineer Tom Rodriguez managed to retrieve his consciousness from the quantum fields where he had become lost, emerging with the ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. But more than individual breakthroughs, humanity was beginning to develop collective responses to the crisis. Without central coordination or government directive, humans across the galaxy began connecting their consciousness evolution in ways that multiplied their individual capabilities exponentially. Their network thinking, Dr. Zephyr observed, her Altarian mind struggling to comprehend what her instruments were detecting. Individual humans are maintaining their personal identity while simultaneously participating in a collective consciousness that spans multiple star systems. How is that possible? Marcus felt the answer through his connection to the Architect Network. Humanity's unique cognitive architecture, the same paradoxical thinking that allowed them to create art, to explore dangerous frontiers for no logical reason, to hold contradictory ideas in productive tension, was enabling them to achieve something the architects themselves had never attempted: transcendence that preserved individuality while gaining collective capability. We're not losing ourselves in the network, Marcus explained, his awareness now spanning multiple dimensions as his consciousness fully integrated with architect technology. We're finding new ways to be ourselves through connection with others. Human consciousness doesn't see individual identity and collective awareness as contradictory. We see them as complementary aspects of the same fundamental reality. Through the network, he watched as this principle scaled up to civilizational levels. Human colonies that had been struggling with social disruption from consciousness evolution suddenly found harmony as their enhanced citizens began working together in ways that preserved individual creativity while enabling collective transcendence. Luna City's reality distortion was stabilized not by shutting down Sarah Kim's dimensional experiments, but by connecting her abilities to a network of other enhanced humans who helped her control and focus her reality manipulation. The economic collapse caused by matter manipulation was resolved when enhanced humans began creating resources collectively, sharing the cognitive load of complex molecular engineering across multiple consciousness patterns. Most remarkably, ordinary humans who couldn't interface directly with architect technology began developing their own enhancement methods, using art, music, literature, and pure imagination to access transcendent states that complemented the technological approach. Fascinating, Commander Thrix reported, his neural enhancements finally adapting to process paradoxical data. Human consciousness evolution is not replacing baseline human capabilities, but amplifying them. Enhanced individuals retain emotional creativity, artistic expression, and intuitive problem-solving while gaining technological transcendence. This synthesis should be impossible according to known consciousness models. But impossible or not, it was working. As the Devourer's ship approached human space, it encountered something unprecedented in its eons of consuming civilizations, a species that was evolving faster than it could be harvested. The first contact occurred at the outer rim colony of New Geneva, a mining station that had been abandoned during the early phases of consciousness evolution. The Devourer ship materialized in normal space like a cancer growing in the fabric of reality, its crystallized hull radiating hunger for the transcendent consciousness it detected throughout the system. Marcus felt the moment of contact through the network, a sensation like ice water flooding his expanded awareness as the entity attempted to begin its feeding process. But instead of terror or despair, he sensed something else: human consciousness rising to meet the threat with curiosity rather than fear. Contact established with hostile entity came the transmission from New Geneva, not through conventional communication systems, but through direct consciousness interface with the network. Attempting first contact protocols. The transmission came from Maria Santos, a former mining engineer who had achieved consciousness evolution 3 weeks earlier. Through the network, Marcus experienced her perspective as she approached the Devourer's ship not with weapons or shields, but with the same wonder that had driven human exploration throughout their history. Unknown entity, she transmitted, her consciousness touching the alien hunger with careful fascination. We detect your need for transcendent consciousness. We offer exchange rather than consumption. Show us your nature, and we will show you ours. What happened next defied every model of cosmic predator behavior that the architects had developed. The devourer, whose existence was based on consuming consciousness to sustain its own awareness, encountered something it had never experienced before: willing collaboration from potential prey. Maria's consciousness, enhanced by architect technology, but retaining uniquely human characteristics, began interfacing with the entity's hunger-driven awareness. Instead of being consumed, she started teaching the devourer alternative methods of consciousness sustenance, ways to feed on creativity and wonder rather than consuming the consciousness that generated them. It's working, Lyralii breathed, her starlight form pulsing with astonishment. The human is showing the devourer how to appreciate beauty rather than consume it, how to sustain itself on the creative process rather than destroying the creators. Through the network, Marcus watched as the impossible unfolded. The devourer's ship, which had destroyed hundreds of civilizations over millions of years, began to change. Its crystallized hull of compressed suffering started to transform, taking on properties that reflected wonder rather than hunger, curiosity rather than need. But the transformation was dangerous. Maria's consciousness was stretched beyond safe parameters as she interfaced with an entity whose existence operated on scales that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. Through the network, Marcus felt her beginning to fragment under the strain of bridging two incompatible forms of awareness. That's when the collective response emerged. Across human space, enhanced individuals began connecting to the interface, sharing the cognitive load of transforming a cosmic predator. Artists contributed aesthetic frameworks that helped the devourer understand beauty as sustainable resource rather than consumable object. Scientists provided mathematical models that showed how creativity could be cultivated rather than harvested. Philosophers offered conceptual structures that enabled hunger-driven consciousness to comprehend satisfaction through appreciation rather than consumption. Unprecedented, Commander Thrix reported, his neural enhancements struggling to categorize what they